So my name is Dr. Jason Evans. I am the Executive Director for the Institute for Water and Environmental Resilience here at Stetson University. We're at the Sandra Stetson Aquatic Center here at Stetson University, so we're right on the St. Johns River. We have a stormwater pond that's right behind us here that we have for the Aquatic Center. So we have some bee mats, and what these are floating wetlands. And so what they do is they treat the water that's in the stormwater pond. So they take the nutrients and other contaminants that might be within the stormwater pond, and they go into the plants. The roots from the aquatic plants, they hang in the water and they're growing there kind of hydroponically. And so any of the nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus that are within the water, that will be dissolved within the water, those roots grab them up. And they can also take up other things like metals that might be suspended in the water. There could be hydrocarbons, say from oil or anything that comes off this parking lot that gets in the water that gets kind of suspended. It can really attach to the roots. And so the aquatic plants are just built, they're nature's filters. And so that's what they do just naturally. And so when you have them floating, then they're just there. It actually helps them even be more effective at that filtration. So we actually got a grant through the EPA. And so working with Volusia County, we wrote a grant to the Florida DEP. And we got money from the EPA to actually put these in. And so it's a water quality improvement grant. It was a complicated process, as it turns out. And so with the university, working with the county, then working with the state government, and then working with the federal government. So you have kind of 4 orders of bureaucracy there. But we wrote the grant, and the idea is that green infrastructure, which is the idea of within the built environment. So within parking lots and buildings and housing developments, that we have all this infrastructure. So things like stormwater retention ponds that we build to help with the environment. But with green infrastructure, the idea is trying to make it look as much like the natural environment as possible. And so that's what we're trying to do here. Interestingly, when we were talking with the state DEP, they insisted that we put the floating mats in there. And the reason why is because they're very effective at treating the nutrients and pollutants with the way that they work. And so since they're floating in the water, any of the nutrients or other contaminants that are there get into the root system. Very, very effective way at treating the water, keeping down algae blooms. And since they're not used all that often, that the DEP wants people to see these things in action. As it turns out, if you have your own stormwater pond, you don't really need to get a permit for any of this. And so that was an interesting process because there was a lot of misunderstanding about the permitting process and a lot of worries. And it helps to inform the DEP. You don't just want to just do this without talking with the agencies. They're there to help you. And if you're doing anything to help improve the water quality within your stormwater pond, and as it turned out with the permit that we already had for the building and for the stormwater pond and for the construction of the site, that doing this was completely allowable. The bee mats company, who is the one that actually makes the floating mats, and they're the ones that install it, they've got a really effective construction process. So they come out, there's the actual mats that float, so they lay those out. They can make them into any shape, and you might even see on ours, it's an S and a U, so it's actually for Stetson University. And so they cut them out, they make them at their own site. They bring them out here, they roll them out. They've got a crew, they had a crew about 25 people, I think, that were on site, rolled them out, kind of got them in, and within a couple hours, everything was all set up. And then the plants go into these little plastic containers. And so they sink the plants into each one of those. And so I was really impressed at how fast it went. So with any kind of floating mat, you just want to make sure that you're not going to put it in a place that's going to block any of the drainage outflow. So that's very important. And you want to know what the nutrients are within your system. And so these actually work the best in pretty high nutrient environments. Most stormwater ponds are gonna have pretty high nutrients, but if you had a very low nutrient system for whatever reason, these aren't gonna thrive. So really just taking into account, making sure you're not gonna impede the functioning of the stormwater facility, and also making sure you're getting kind of your bang for the buck in terms of your treatment. What you want to do is you want to harvest the excess material about twice a year. And so we actually harvested the material back in November. And so when you get into the winter months, so you have all the plants growing up over the summer, and then you don't want that material just to die and go back into the stormwater pond. It just kind of loads the nutrients back. So coming in and kind of doing like a mowing type event, but then you capture all the material. You don't just let it go into the pond. You take it, you scoop it up, and then you use it for compost or for some other kind of purpose. The only issue we've had has really been weeds that kind of get into them. And so there is a little bit of weeding involved to make sure that they look nice and that you have the plants that you want. Right now, since we've had kind of a cold winter in Volusia County and we've had a couple frosts, the plants look a little brown right now, which is completely fine and natural. And then the roots are still actually treating contaminants. It's not like the plants are dead. So that can make people a little bit nervous when they see kind of brown plants. And it's like, no, that's just winter. Yeah, really just the weeds and just making sure that they look nice are really the most important considerations. So I think if you want to put these in your ponds, think really creatively. You can make them look however you want. Like say if you're like a developer and you could have it be the name of your company. I mean, you could actually put the letters, or if you have some kind of logo. And that's what we did with Stetson. I have to admit that some within the administration at Stetson were skeptical of the floating mats, and I had to sell it sort of to the university. And what finally sold it was when we had the SU design. And so people that were skeptical before, when they saw, oh, school spirit, people fly over with a plane and they're gonna see SU, oh, we love that idea, right? And so thinking of these not just in terms of the ecological functions, which of course interest people like me, but they can be attractive amenities and they can give kind of visual interest to your stormwater pond. It's not just a stormwater pond. People will go to it to go look at it, hike around, marvel at whatever it is that you've created. There's one up at Clemson University that's actually a tiger. There's one up at University of Georgia that's a big G. And so you can do any of these kind of designs. And so that's what I would just encourage people is be creative and kind of think of what you want your community to look like and how this can kind of fit into that. What's been really interesting here is we have people that come in and walk around our site and just look and, just very interested in what we're doing. And these things attract wildlife. So birds come in and they like to hunt along the sides of them. So, they are very good habitat. And if you like birds, if you like alligators, we have a little alligator that sits on top of these sometimes. And so they will become part of the ecosystem.